Good morning, everyone. Dear colleagues and guests, I'm Anke Leroux. I'm an environmental and resource economist and associate professor at the economics department at Monash University. And I'm really very pleased to host the Monash Energy Institute seminar today. And I thank you all for joining us online and as well as in the room. I wish to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners and custodians of the land where I'm hosting this session today, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. This Monash Energy Seminar series will inform our community about research around emerging trends in sustainable energy and the energy transition, while connecting researchers to research challenges in their respective disciplinary areas that underpin the development solutions to Monash's climate change challenge of the age. Monash Energy Institute hosts these seminars every month. Sorry, we have an echo. And I look forward to meeting all current and potential Monash Energy Institute affiliated researchers and your research students to this institute. This is our 5th Monash Energy Seminar, and I'm now very pleased to welcome Flavio Menezes. Flavio is a professor in economics and the director of the Australian Institute for Business and Economics at the University of Queensland. He is also the chair of the Queensland Competition Authority. He is a former president of the Economic Society of Australia and was a member of the advisory board of the federal government's deregulation task force and an elected member of UQ's academic board and its standing committee. He's a former head of school of the economics department at UQ and a chair of the research evaluation committee for economics and commerce, so ERA 2018. And you were also a member of the same committee in 2015.
I've done wrong, Brennan.
Professor Menezes is a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia. He's an associate editor of Journal of Public Economics, and he has published really extensively on the economics of auctions, competition and regulatory economics, industrial organization and market design. Lots of very exciting and interesting papers. Professor Menezes' engagement with industry and government is really significant. He has experience, or his experience includes advising the federal government, the AEMC, the ACCC, IPART, the QCA, and the ACT and Victorian governments on market design issues in regulatory environments. He has also provided economic advice to many private and public organizations on competition and regulatory issues in defense, fisheries, water, gambling, natural resources, energy, smart cities, banking, health, transport, and telecommunications. A very long list there. So please join me to welcome Professor Flavio Menezes.
Thank you. Can I make sure that people watching this online, if they are listening to us, yeah, all good? Okay, cool. Look, let me start also by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet today, and I want to pay my respects to the ancestors and their descendants. So what I want to do today is to talk to you about why, I think I need to, why we need to manage the exit of coal, okay? And I mean, you know, and what I do is I provide 2 kind of pieces of evidence. I'm yet to come to a seminar that doesn't have a problem. Anyway, that's fine, don't worry. Or except that I might need to do this, because this is not working either. Oh, there you go. Maybe we'll work now. Yes, there you go. Okay, cool. So look, so what I want to do today is to give you sort of 2 pieces of evidence for why we need to manage the exit of coal. And I mean, I'm sure will come to no surprise to you. But the contribution really is to measure, right? To get a sense of what is sort of the impact of renewables on the dynamics, or the market dynamics, on prices, okay? And B, what's the potential impact of an unmanaged exit of coal? And we have some significant evidence of a significant impact of the exit of coal. And if I do have some time, I want to talk a little bit about the mechanism that we can use to manage the exit of coal. Only if we have time at the end. Now, don't worry. I mean, this is a very busy slide. It takes me a full 2-hour lecture to unpack this slide, so I'm not going to try to do that here today. And I kind of appreciate too that for some people in this room, this is their day job, so I'm not really going to unpack this. Let me just say that. Sorry.
For some reason, I don't see the presentation. As I change something now. It's good.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes.
Great. No worries. So let me then instead, rather than just go to this slide, and you can look at this slide at your own pace when having dinner later tonight. Anyway, you can just give sort of a sense of what was the NEM really about. Was designed really to integrate sort of different state grids into a single market, and we were going to drive sort of efficient consumption, production, and investment decisions. Retail competition then was the mechanism used to make sure that competitive wholesale prices would pass through to final consumers. And we had sort of essentially a independent regulator that was established to ensure that the network, the monopoly bit, was also priced efficiently. And the idea was really optimizing an existing set of infrastructure, right? And so, for example, when you look at the regulatory test that we use to allow transmission distribution investment into their regulatory asset base, if you look at those tests, they're really designed for incremental change. They're not really designed for the kind of change that we are talking about today. All right, so look, so this is really kind of the NEM of the past. And if you think, well, okay, now think about the last decade, and this is really, the last decade is really what's happening here. You probably can't see, but that's a combination, that convoluted list of interventions, essentially out of market interventions. They were kind of related to climate change, energy policy. So there's a list there, but you can add to that list as well the half of the NEG, because you only got the half of it, the National Energy Guarantee. Anyway, so point is that really has been a sort of incremental piecemeal approach, right, to that energy transition. That hasn't really worked, right? And to date, what we have experienced is that out of market interventions by governments have really been driving the transition, right? Really. And then you can quite rightly ask, well, then why bother about the market? Okay. I'm going to spend the next half an hour, 20 minutes talking about the market. So, I'm wasting my time. And I want to kind of explain why I don't think so, okay? And to do that, I have to do a little bit of kind of crystal ball gazing and think about what is the electricity system of the future is going to look like, right? And if you think about it, I mean, it will be more centralized or more decentralized? More decentralized, right? Okay, not only geographically, but also, you won't see the large power plants, one of which I'm going to talk about next. You won't see those. It's a much more decentralized system, relying on fixed cost technology and zero marginal cost, right? So this is solar and wind, but also lots of storage, right? And for the lack of better terminology, demand side management, to soak in all the excess renewables that we're going to have inevitably, right? Now, we're also going to have more active consumers, right? So the example, what I think about is, look, today we worry about sort of, making sure that our phones are charged, our devices are charged, right? Now you have to worry, then, well, some people, but eventually we all have to worry about sort of charging and potentially discharge your car. Right now, we're talking about sort of, a much bigger, electricity will be a much bigger part of your life, right? Because electricity is going to be such a bigger part of your life, our engagement, the nature of our engagement with electricity is going to change. So we're going to have these active consumers. Now, can a central planner, right? Can a central planner, would that central planner be able to set prices that are efficient? Not really, right? Because you need information about the value that consumers and producers, and keep in mind that consumers will be producers as well, right? Or some of us are anyway already, right? So will a central planner have any chance of getting efficient prices right? Right? I mean, the prices and the value will be dependent upon the time of the day, will depend upon the use of electricity. So there's no chance a central planner will be able to do that. And instead, we'll need really, and I'll emphasize this, a really well-designed market, right? To allow for the sort of price discovery, and that price discovery then is needed because we need efficient price to achieve, efficient consumption, production, and investment decisions. So one of the biggest challenges that I think we face now is how we pull together these all these out-of-market interventions. In Queensland, the government had just released the $62 billion, and just pause for effect, dramatic effect, $62 billion plan. It's called the Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan. So Victoria had its own plan, New South Wales have their own plan, everyone else. So how we pull all these things together. The federal government has some initiatives that really kind of confused and confusing. So how we put them all together in a set of market and regulatory arrangements. Aren't you happy that you're not at the AMC anymore, right? So how we put them all together in a set of regulatory and market arrangements that will promote the long-term interests of consumers and achieve net zero, right? That's really a big challenge. But the whole point of this spiel here is to say, look, we're going to need a market. Now, because we're going to need a market, we need to understand what's happening to the market in the transition, and then think about what the market of the future would look like, right? But today I'll talk about the transition, right? So what's happening during the transition. And so what I'm going to do, if now we lost. Thank you. Can leave it there. So what I'm going to do is, the first bit is talk about the market impact of renewables, right? And that's a big part of the story of the transition. Now, most of the literature has focused on the contemporaneous, the effect of contemporaneous production on prices. So, for example, the impact of the amount of solar wind that produced at 10:30 in the morning on price at 10:30 in the morning, right? So that's most of what the literature has focused on. And it's not really surprising that that effect, which we refer to as the merit order effect, because it affects the merit order, not really surprising that that has a negative effect, right? Because we're adding a technology generation that is produced at zero marginal cost. So we'll have a negative effect. But what we want to show is that increases in daily production, not half-hour, daily production of solar and wind actually impact distribution of prices throughout the day. So in fact, turns out that and think of daily production as a proxy for capacity. So what we can try to estimate is what is the medium run, once you allow capacity to vary, right? So capacity, you can't install solar, it's fast, but you cannot do it overnight, right? So once you allow capacity to change, what is the impact of that change on the distribution of price throughout the day? And you see that the capacity as measured by this proxy affects prices when the sun is shining and when the sun is not shining, okay? And these are this is the whole point of the talk, is the dynamics of the market, okay? And that obviously has implications for the economics of coal, okay? And I'll show you a slide in a moment where that's going to be clear. I'll probably skip through this, but essentially this is our approach, our empirical approach. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to estimate the impact of these variables, total solar, total wind. So try to estimate those betas there, the beta S and the beta W, which are essentially a measure of the average changes in the wholesale price during half hour T in region R, where T is, so this is pre 5-minute settlement. So we talk about 30-minute prices. So for each half hour of the day and for each region of the NEM, okay? And then we control for things like gas prices, coal prices, interconnection limitations, total demand trends, whether it's a weekday or no, we control for a bunch of stuff, right? Because we're trying to build this a counterfactor effect. What would be the price if you didn't have that extra megawatt hour of solar daily production, right? So that's what we're trying to do, achieve here. So the merit order effect is usually the contemporaneous effect, 10:30 a.m. Solar production, the impact of that on the price at 10:30 a.m. Now we're looking at the kind of medium term. So it's a merit order effect, right? Because it still affects the merit order, but not instantaneously, right? And it's over so the thought exercise is, what's the impact of one additional megawatt hour a day on prices? And I'll very quickly have to multiply that by 1,000 to make sense. But anyway, because 1 megawatt hour a day is not much, but we'll get there when we get there. Right, so is that clear? So we essentially trying to estimate the impact of an additional, let's call it megawatt hour of daily solar production on the distribution of price throughout the day, and the same for wind, okay? And sort of, let me just get through the results. So turns out that up to July 2018, there wasn't enough solar generation in the NEM, so talk about solar in the NEM, to provide any kind of insights. It's really after July 2018 when somehow we observed a very large, very sharp increase in daily production of solar that we got some interesting results, and we can show that the black dots are pre-July 2018, so from 2009 to January 2009 to July 2018. And then the orange dots, I think, or squares, I'm not sure, I think squares, they are essentially from July 2018 to, I think our sample goes to October 2020, okay? And you can see that most of the impact is small, mostly negative, positive when the sun comes down, and that's kind of a key element, okay? And that is positive when the sun comes down. And so again, because I just had 1 megawatt hour there. So this is megawatt hour. So I'll do it here. This is megawatt hour this time of the day. So for example, this is, it should be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay. So the average from the orange dot here is the impact from 1 extra megawatt hour on the price, the average price from July 2018 to October 2020 at 3 o'clock.
When you're pointing at the screen, people online might.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no. Thank you for reminding me. We still have been doing this for 2 years, but still forget from time to time. All right, cool. So yeah, it will be easy for you too. So here, this is supposed to be like 330. And so this is the average, right? The average from July 2018 to October 2020 of the impact, average impact on price at that time for 1 extra megawatt hour a day. Now, because 1 megawatt hour a day is not much, let's say multiply that by 1,000 to get the impact. Now, the thought exercise is if you add 1 gigawatt hour extra a day of solar production, okay? For you to have the maximum solar production during this December period was about 50 gigawatt hours a day. So if you add yes. So if you add 1 gigawatt hour, then you have a decrease of 2 megawatt hours at 5 o'clock and an increase of 2 megawatt hours when the sun comes down at 6:30. And so it doesn't seem much, but now multiply by, say, if you add 50 gigawatt hours a day. And that's not crazy because that's the kind of, this is the medium run. And this is the kind of, if you look at the ISP, for example, the integrated system planning, we talk about 20 extra gigawatts of solar capacity, but then you have to multiply that by 8 hours or whatever number of hours you have of sun, 10, let's say, right? So 50 is not much. So now we're saying, no, $100 reduction in prices at 5 o'clock, and $150 reduction in prices at 3 o'clock. Yes.
Whether there are more or days.
Yeah, we control for total. We control for that. Yeah, we control for. That variable X had a bunch of stuff there. Yeah. No, it was. And so we have demand will depend on that, right? It's driven essentially by electricity. Demand is essentially driven by temperature. All right. So and the number. So. And that's not really, so this is talk about the medium run effect, right? And so when you look at the NEM now and look at the number of instances where we have, zero negative prices, it's not really surprising, and it's going to get worse. That's what this analysis is telling you, right? As the penetration of renewables increases, these merit order effects will increase as well in size. Okay, and so what does that have to do with coal? And that is an interesting question. I think we just need to. It's not working again. Anyway. Okay, cool. All right. So no, the other one is, so what does that have to do with coal? Okay. And so what I've done is now we're trying to explain changes in the generation of other types of generators, okay? So now the variable that we're trying to explain is just the production of other generators. And what you can see again from this picture is that most of the change happens in black coal, right? And again, the exercise is 1 megawatt hour of total daily solar extra leads to, say, a small reduction, say at 11 o'clock a.m. Now, if you do the same thing, multiply that by 10, so an increase of 10 megawatt hours a day of solar, which is not 10 of 1 gigawatt hour a day, which is not much. Then there's a reduction of 10% in black coal at 11 o'clock. That's 11 o'clock. Then the diagram. And then if you multiply by 50, you have 50 gigawatts hour extra of solar, then it's a 50% reduction. Right? And then you notice the ramping up as well, right? And gas the same also ramps up, but because gas is more expensive, it turns out that black coal is really what's driving because the combination of their flexibility with the prices, the fuel prices, right? So gas can do that, it's more flexible, but it's more expensive as well. Okay. All right. So that really, and then just briefly on wind. Wind is a bit more standard. You know, you have the standard effect that that one extra, say, gigawatt hour of wind gets you a much smaller reduction, about 27 cents, say at 12 o'clock, okay, at midnight. Again, if you multiply by, so if you look at the ISP, we're talking about changes in increases in wind of, I don't know, 20 gigawatts, 30 gigawatts, multiply that by more than 10 hours a day, then again, you're talking about very large, we're talking about now $25 megawatt hour reduction in prices, right? And so this really the key takeaways from this is the first piece of evidence is, you know, faster than originally anticipated transition, right? So you just need to look at the evolution of the ISPs as well to see, you know, this is kind of well known, right? Much faster. You have declining, and so what does that mean for the economics of coal? Well, declining spot market revenue because of this merit order effect, and our results suggest they're going to get more pronounced as penetration of renewables increase. But also the second bit of that is the rising cost, right? Because you now have to run a plant of a less quantity, so your quasi-fixed cost is spread over a smaller quantity, so your costs go up, right? And also reduced availability, and so then you can ask the question, well, what might happen if we don't manage? So what I'm saying is that the economics of coal are such that we will see, and we have already seen, earlier than anticipated exit of coal, right? But can we measure the impact that an unanticipated exit of a large coal-fired power station would have on market prices? And it turns out that you can. You guys in Victoria have provided the evidence for us to look at. So this is the closure of Hazelwood in 2017. Okay, it was 3 months notice, and Hazelwood is brown coal, not black coal, so it runs mostly all the time. And you have it was about 20% of the Victorian market, not really, but anyway, 20% of capacity in Victoria and about 5% of NEM capacity. Right? So it's a large power plant.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, large power
And
plant.
some toast soldiers. You're having toast soldiers to
That's interesting. Okay. All right. Hopefully, yeah, no, I kind of want to hear the rest of the story, but anyway, so what we've done, so like I said, they closed with 3 months notice, and what we've done is really an event, what we call an event study. So we looked at the impact of the exit of Hazelwood on market price. Again, look at the distribution throughout the day, okay? And we looked at 1 year before, 1 year later. And we construct the counterfactual, right? Because that's how you do it, right? You ask the question, what would be the price if Hazelwood wouldn't have exited, right? And then so we have to control for all this stuff, and then we compare that with the price, the actual market price, okay? And the way and so we find, just to give a kind of a flavor, the market impact was, hey man, how are you? The market impact was, so 12 months after the closure, right? It translated into an increase in market revenue. And as anyone will tell you, market revenue means the consumers are paying, right? Of $6.5 billion, okay? $6.5 billion. That was the kind of market impact, controlling for all the stuff that was going on at the time, okay? And so that in itself is interesting because it tells you, and if you're not convinced, if you were paying attention in June, coincidentally just 2 weeks after someone left the EMC. You know that if something happens with one of the large coal-fired power plants, the market gets it gets complicated, right? Okay. So that's it in itself, the magnitude, right? Because we're going to compare that, for example, with the abatement costs. Okay. Right. And we could have done a lot more abatement with that money. Okay. But just to give an example of the trade-offs, right? But that's not the only interesting bit. What we've done is we kind of unpacked the impact and tried to understand how that impact went through, right? And it has to do with the merit order effect as well, which is kind of, I think, it's interesting, okay? Because we need to understand these things as we transition, right, to a market where we still have some of these guys, but large fraction of renewables. Okay. Let's see. So this is our empirical approach, and again, similar to before, and we now, the equation on top gives us the overall impact, and really what we're looking at is estimating that variable beta, H 12, that's really the impact 12 months after the closure, and we control again for a bunch of stuff, which I won't get into it, but the breakdown, I think, is the interesting bit, is that we estimated the impact of the closure on the merit order effect, okay? So we broke down the overall impact into direct impact, into a direct impact, and into a direct impact and into an indirect impact, okay? And so this is the overall impact. And if you average, so again, what's the exercise here? The exercise is removing a power plant that has a capacity of 1.6 gigawatts, right? So potentially 1.6 gigawatts an hour, potentially, right? We're removing that from the market and asking what is the impact on prices? Well, it turns out that on average, throughout the day, so impact varies throughout the day. Why? Because you're displacing different generators, and I'll come back to that, which from my point of view is the more interesting bit. But if you average the impact, it gives you an average of $24 a megawatt hour. Okay. Now, anyone remember what the price was around 2017, 2018 average price for the year? Anyone? 80. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that gives a sense of how significant, how big, how large the impact was. Okay, was big. Just in case. All right. Now this is the bit that I find interesting. Okay, more interesting. The first bit is painful. This is some gain from the pain. If you there's one way of looking at it. Now what I've done is, again, we try to estimate how that overall impact came about. It turns out it came about mostly from a reduction in the merit order effect of winds. Okay, so again, my black dots are the estimates of the impact of one additional, so let's call it, I'm calling now one additional gigawatt extra of wind production in a half hour. Okay, and before the closure, you had that 1 gigawatt hour. Now I'm talking about contemporaneous, right? I'm not talking about capacity anymore. So 1 gigawatt extra would reduce prices in the NEM at that half hour by $39. With the closure, that reduction was $21. Okay? So in fact, it had an impact on the merit order effect. And so that's, I think, why I was interested in that, to understand, so what is the impact on the supply curve, right? And if you think about it, right, coal. So what happens with, what happens if you remove a large power plant as Hazelwood? Well, black coal, coal in general will have to produce more, right? And that will increase costs because they fuel supply curves are usually upward sloping, right? They'll have to, they'll be more costly. Be a bit more of gas as well. Again, they have to go and buy the gas. They have to compete with LNG. Usually that leads to higher prices, high costs. So that's one, if you like, direct impact, right? Okay. The cost curves go up. I mean, they are at different points of the cost curves. Okay. That's one impact, the direct impact. But what's interesting is the wind. So think about, let's think through the impact of how the merit order effect works, right? So I'm thinking of, and I'm going to use very general description of bids here, okay? So think of gas and coal bidding behavior as follows. Again, very broadly. Let's say they put in, I don't know, 40 to 50% to make sure that on, let's call negative price, make sure that they are dispatched, make sure that they are stable load. So they put 45–50% of the capacity in the sort of negative price space to ensure that, you know, they achieve that minimum stable load. That depends on technology, whatever, right? But that, let's say, let's call that negative price. So in the bid segments, let's call that negative price, okay? And then there's a bid that's maybe let's call that 20–30% that is marginal cost pricing, okay? And why do they do that? Because remember, these guys have sold hedges, right? So they want to be dispatched, okay? So they have this financial contract, these hedging contracts, so they want to be dispatched. So they put, say, 20–30%. Then the balance is, let's call that strategic bids, okay? Now, under high wind conditions, say there's a increase in wind production, then what happens is these guys will move bids from, you know, the strategic part of the bid into marginal cost and negative, right? And therefore, that's why you have the merit order effect, right? They have to, because they're now competing with wind, it has a zero marginal cost, right? So they move, that will reduce the strategic sort of bid, quantity, the strategic bid of the bid. Now, if you remove a large coal-fired power plant, works like undoing this impact of wind, okay? So that's really where the effect comes from, is indirectly through a reduction in the merit order effect, okay? Because they are now able to place more of their bids into a higher price, okay? Into that strategic part of the bid function, which essentially involves higher prices. Now, I've done some robustness checks. I'm not going to spend time on that. It's really the key takeaway. Again, significant. I mean, it will come to no surprise to you. The only novelty here is really that we came up with a number, right? Everyone knew that the price had gone up. People mentioned an impact of $9 billion because the market revenue increased by 9, but that's not all, right? Because you have to control for things that would have happened anyway. So when you do that, you have a market impact of $6.5 billion, right? And that the way we did it is just multiply the quantity by the price at times of the day, right? So that's why you got the $6.5 billion. And then you can compare that with the $400 million required for the plant to continue to be operational. And also what we've done is, okay, how much emissions reduction? I mean, brown coal, it's, you also don't need to tell you, it's really bad for the environment. But how much abatement that the removal of Hazelwood had resulted on. And then by looking at estimates of emissions and now multiply that by the average ACCU price that in 2017, we got $87 million. Right? And then it's okay, let's multiply that by the certificate in Europe, and then you get $155 million. Right? Oh, but that remains for that reduction is forever, right? Yes, but Hazelwood wouldn't have operated forever. But let's say that reduction for 10 years. Hazelwood operated for an additional 10 years. It's still $870 million. So we could have bought $6.5 billion of abatement instead, right? Okay, does that make sense? I hope it does. All right, so, and I think also important to understand that the exit of coal, as they exit, there's an interaction with the merit order effect. There's an interaction with and how does that interaction occur? Occurs through the bidding behavior in the NEM, okay? So that's something to keep in mind as well. So look, just really, I hope really I have sort of convinced you that that we really need to manage the exit of coal, and the reason being, if you think about sort of the uncertainty, right? That so in an event like that, say Hazelwood exited, the wholesale price go up, right? Sure, coal-fired power stations will benefit in the short run, okay? But these dynamics that I've mentioned, the merit order effect and the increase in the merit order effect as renewables, the penetration of renewables increases, that will continue, right? And so what that does is just increase the uncertainty around the exit of coal. So the market had sort of, had priced particular power plants to exit at particular points in time. If there's an anticipated exit, then that calculation, kind of goes away, right? And there's more uncertainty. More uncertain than, means what? Means that the transition is more costly, right? Why? Because if I'm investing in renewables, if I'm investing in storage, I'm investing in transmission, right? I have to take that uncertainty into account, right? And that makes it the transition more costly. So hopefully I convinced you of that. And so as you may or may not know, in the Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan, they actually have committed to the closure of coal-fired power stations. And it's a bit hazy, I grant you that, it's not entirely clear how that's going to work. The dates, yes. Oh, I don't know exactly the dates, but in the plan, there's an appendix, a technical appendix of specific dates. It doesn't go to the generating units, that's what you need, but it goes to that power plant has to close by 2033, et cetera, et cetera. It's a bit, and become a clean energy hub. That transition is a bit unclear, but nevertheless, they've committed to it, okay? And now people are figuring out how to do it, okay? But as I keep telling them, look, this is okay, good, but you need, so what happened? So what the idea, I think the plan is they're going to keep, say, cold storage, be able to operate seasonally. But that's costly. Who's going to pay for that? I hope I'm not paying for it, but I have a feeling that I may. But anyway, and the reason being, is an integrated market. So if I'm cold storage, I'm going to provide, I'm going to provide power when power is needed. I'm going to benefit, New South Wales, and so on and so forth. So I'm essentially, if the government is going to pay for that, we are going to pay for that, then it means that we are cross-subsidizing other people who are not willing to do that, right? So I think there's a need there for managing that exit. And 10 years ago, we were working on how you design mechanisms so that people, so the power plants, they reveal the true cost of closure, and with the idea of reducing emissions. I think we're past that now. I think my suggestion now is for AEMO and Climate Change Authority to get together, find an optimal schedule that we don't know is not going to be, may not be optimal. And then this mechanism I'm talking about is really about how you incentivize the power plants to actually remain operational. It's the opposite almost. Remain operational until a fixed date, Okay, so operate when IMO needs them to operate, and that requires thinking in a slightly different way. For example, one component, and I think you'll be either shocked or surprised by that, is that one component is that you, for example, under this mechanism, you would if you coal-fired power station and you sign up, you won't be bidding the NEM anymore, because they're going to be paid separately, okay, to generate whenever. And then when you are dispatched, then you get your marginal cost. I'm kind of simplifying here, okay? But you get a payment. That payment is so that you're available at the time that they need you, roughly, okay? So that's a very different way of thinking about that stuff. And once upon a time, I'll be criticizing this mechanism because it's another market intervention, but we're past that now. So now I'm thinking how we sort of untangle this mess. And one part of that jigsaw puzzle is providing an exit schedule for coal-fired power station. That's one piece of that jigsaw, and it's one that you can kind of have a go at solving it, addressing it rather quickly, right? Rather than just take another 5 years. And then it'll be the go from post 2025 to post, I don't know, 2030 and then 35. So this can be done in a year, right? So essentially, and then we provide certainty for investors in renewables, in storage, and in transmission. And I think I will stop here. Now there's some stuff I'm doing at the moment. So the other side, I'm just 2 minutes on that. So another interesting question in my mind is, what will storage do? What's the role of storage in terms of market dynamics? Okay, and why I'm interested in that? Well, the issues, for example, of do I allow, if you're a power plant generating units, do I allow you to own as well storage? I'm talking about large storage. Remembering that storage, the business model is one that lives off arbitrage. Do you see the problem there? So there's competition issues there. It's a bit unclear, so this is an attempt to do that. And so because of after the war in Ukraine, unfortunately, our natural experiments are not great. So there was exit of Hazelwood, and then the other one is the war in Ukraine. But as a result of the war in Ukraine, lots of storage investments, say in the Nord Pool. Nord Pool it's a bit different from the NEM because it's not a growth pool, but nevertheless, we're trying to understand and it's not storage is really gas storage mostly, but you just want to understand the role of storage in market dynamics. They have hourly prices anyway. They're slightly different settings, but again, why we want to do that? Because we want to understand, this market dynamics so that we can talk about competition, right? How competition may look like. And now I'm talking about the name of the future or whatever market we have in the future. Okay, I hope this makes sense. And I'm going to stop now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing with us your research on renewable energy. For the wholesale market. Now I'm going to ask people to ask questions online and in here, and I'm going to alternate a bit between the two. And because I'm your host, I'm going to ask the first question. Microphone. Okay. Right. So I was just interested. When you look at the International Energy Agency modeling for how the energy sector should transition towards net zero, say by 2050, they usually model something like no emission intensive or no coal without carbon capture and storage by 2040 worldwide. And I was just wondering how Australia might look at that kind of transition for Australia, whether that's something that you see as being feasible, whether that would come at sort of similar high costs that you've been estimating.
So a couple of things to unpack. I think so just put aside coal for the moment. I think everything I've looked at, we'll still have gas by 2040 and possibly by 2050. It's going to be very difficult. We will still have some kind of peaking ability to do that, right? So let's put that aside. For coal, I think what I'm suggesting here is that that won't be a problem. In some sense, by 2040, there'll be no coal left, right? The issue is no coal-fired power station left. The issue really is where it's going to be managed so that we, can plan. So 10 years ahead, we know what we have time to build all these new transmission lines. We have time to do all this other stuff.
Oh, hang on.
Or it's unmanaged. So I don't think that's a kind of a constraint, right? The bigger problem, I think, is gas by 2050. So we'll need to find a way, that's kind of, it's a practical thing, really. But it's going to be very difficult, very costly to move away from have gas as a peaking. I mean, maybe people disagree. Maybe there are other ways, but I haven't seen yet a convincing kind of argument for that would get rid of all the gas by 2050.
So there are models of market exit. From what Mike Winston, what's the difference here?
This is market exit for the NEM, and that's so the first difference is this idea that once you get into this, you're not dispatching. So this happens within a wholesale market design where other generators will be bidding in that market, right? So that's kind of a key difference. That's not just an exit. It's just not an exit of a market. It's an exit of a market where other companies are still bidding, and so you have to take that into account. The second bit, the availability payments. I'm calling availability payments. I don't want anyone to shoot me, but anyway, but they are okay. Effectively. So I'm being kind of honest, right? And that has a component that can use insights from that type of model, right?
Thanks, Flavio. Thanks for the fantastic talk. And I think, I'd like to see the 2-hour version actually, because there's probably a lot more detailed and interesting analysis. There's two, I'm wondering how, my concern is that when we look at it at a sort of a 2030, 2050 timeframe, which is generally, I think, I don't know, is that true? Like you're talking about implementing something that works at that time frame, and if so, I wonder how that interacts with other things that people are talking about. I know like Guillaume and Simon and others are working on market design changes away from a pure energy only spot market, which is sort of like a design. It is an artifact. We designed it a certain way, and it's particularly vulnerable to these sort of effects. Maybe can we change things at the same time? Is that a bad idea? And can we co-design these things? And the complementary other thing that's happening at the same time is that there are challenges that are engineering challenges that will emerge much earlier than the worst of the closures, that around when you probably looked at the minimum net system load issue, where you're getting to the point where the belly of the duck curve is so low that you have to start turning coal plant off in the middle of the day, and then you can't turn it back on again. And that's happening according to AEMA around 2025, that really bad stuff, right? So how would you, is there a way you can sort of harmonize these issues?
Yeah, so look, these are very good questions. The first question, I think the second question, I think is easier. And anyway, it's nice to see you. The second question, I think it's somewhat easier, because what I have in mind is really AEMO and people sitting down and figuring out what's the optimal way of doing it. Okay, so that takes care of that. All right. It might not be, that's why I use optimal. So yeah, exactly. What's kind of the least, sort of the one that's going to have the least cost to us, but it's not going to be pretty. I agree. The first question I think is harder. The way I see it, why is hard? Because, for example, you have to think about other markets for services that don't, we had it for free because it's just a byproduct of this type of electricity system that we had, and now we're going to have to pay for them. So this is all happening at the same time, and to some extent, when you in my mind, that's why you need to do it now and sooner. Once you set up the exit schedule, then you're going to figure, then you know precisely what the services that they're going to need. And then you might, you might even, God forbid, instead of using the wholesale market, you might have to procure them. So I imagine, that transition is going to be messy, but so I see this exit mechanism as a first step, and then that will inform the timing of this stuff. And it may well be that the market changes will only take place, say, 10 years from now. And so within that framework, then AEMO might need to procure some services, okay? Knowing what the actual exit, not only exit, availability, right? So I'm really talking about availability, right? Making sure that when you need them, they will they will turn on and so on. Does that make sense? Look, the sooner the better, really. Yeah. I would say less. I'd say 12 months. That'll be my. And as you know, as you guys know, in this space, even though electricity, we have microseconds, and in terms of policy, things are not changing fast enough. It's a bit of a dilemma.
Hi, Flavio. Thanks very much for your presentations. A couple of questions. First one's probably a little naive one for the uneducated, but you mentioned that as coal plants retire, wholesale market prices will go up. And you also said that that creates some volatility to drive uncertainty for investment for new investors in the sector. I'm just wondering why that is. If the wholesale price is going up, I would have thought the renewable sector, wind farm developers, for example, would see higher value through those wholesale prices and therefore would actually drive investment in renewables.
It's about uncertainty, right? So yes, so there's also that increasing price. So because what happens is that increasing price then changes the economics of coal temporarily. And so if you had budget in your investment, yeah, sure, but that's temporary, right? When you build your renewables, and you're not going to benefit from that high price, right? You're not going to benefit from that high price. By the time
the remaining coal plants that'll benefit from the higher wholesale price.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously existing, so everyone will benefit. Everyone, consumers won't, but every producer will benefit from it, right? But doesn't affect. No, but if I'm doing my calculating my whether I'm going to invest or not, I'm not going to count on that because that price increase is temporary, right? And so
it makes it difficult to model.
And then the uncertainty, additional uncertainty as well. Exactly, I had my model and I had power plant X, just not to name names, retire in 2032, right? But that it may well be that change in something that those kind of temporary dynamics might have moved that date. okay, because they have to do something to operate a bit longer, whatever, I don't know. And that creates uncertainty. And that uncertainty then translates itself into a higher, hurdle rate for investment.
Great. Just so the other question I had was just switching gears for a little bit. Announcements like the Victorian government's announcement, $1 billion for state-owned generation to drive prices down, etc. What impact? How does that change the game? What do you hypothesize, speculate would happen in the marketplace with such announcements?
So I did say that the Queensland government announced a $62 billion plan. Look, I mean, I think the big challenge. So the exit of coal, I think, is the first step. But the big challenge, and we haven't done a good job at that, is really how we put this all together back into like I said, a regulatory market arrangements that will work. I mean, to some extent, I understand why they're doing that, because there's no action, the same reason for the Queensland government, right? But that's not the solution. Okay, so I'll be polite and stop there.
It's extension. You have a question?
Yeah, no, there is you effectively by renewable generation has that impact on prices. But keep in mind that what we estimate can be thought of as changes in the merit order effect over time as capacity increases. That's the best way to describe, I think, what you have done. Yes.
I'm just trying to dig into Guillaume's question a bit further, because I think it's an interesting point, and as not being an economist, I'm not sure what's an externality exactly versus what isn't, but it feels like maybe it's too far away.
Well,
anyway, the question is, you're saying,
okay, we can't get closer.
are we saying that we sort of didn't anticipate the interaction between the merit order effect as designed into our market and the lots of zero marginal cost generation coming online? Is that, maybe Guillaume can say, is that sort of, in a way, it's might be acting as an externality?
I think you have to unmute yourself, Guillaume.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Hi, Flavio.
Hey.
Sorry, I'm not there in person. So no, the question I had was, there are established results on exits, or especially in multi-plan context. So I was wondering first, how different is the NEM? But then you were pointing at the bidding process effectively, and so I'm kind of wondering what the extent to which the merit order effects, enforces some kind of externalities on other firms, and so therefore may have a strategic sort of elements to what happens upon exits.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way I described it, if you recall, it was the impact of wind, for example, right? It was it does obviously. It's just, I'm not sure if externality is the right sort of framework, but nevertheless, yeah, it has a strategic effect, right? Because you coal or gas, then if you think about your supply function being one that's split between, negative prices so that you have minimum stable load, then a bit of another bit of your capacity that's bidding on at marginal cost because you want to be dispatched because you have these hedging contracts, and then the bit that's strategic, right? And so where wind, say in high wind situation, then coal power stations will shift that strategic bit to the marginal cost of the negative price. And so in that sense, so I would say it's a strategic effect.
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
Thanks for the very interesting piece of analysis. I think one of the things that really came out for me was the importance that the exit was unanticipated. That's the key feature, I think, of this exit. As I recall it, the market didn't see it coming, future prices didn't factor it in. I think it was a decision made essentially by international owners, not really reflecting the kind of the value in the market at the time. The main way that the market as designed currently factors in or tries to manage that unanticipated events through contracts. As I understand it, the $6.5 billion that you identified, was that per year, by the way?
It was 12 months after, yes.
For the 12 months after, so actually it could have been more than that over a more sustained
No,
period.
I've actually done that, and turns out that the effect then goes away. But anyway, yeah.
Well, okay, so $6.5 billion of increased revenue through the spot market. I would expect much of that might have actually been sort of eroded through contracts. So it's interesting, yeah. Would you want to be able to comment on that? And is it possible to kind of refine the work to factor that in if that would be a sensible thing to do?
Oh no, yes, it's a very good question, and yes, obviously we understand that, and but just we don't have data, so because there's no visibility. There's no visibility. I mean, you can have over-the-counter stuff, but there's no visibility. There's a long discussion about whether these contracts should be made it sort of so that people can see, and there's no visibility. So yeah, but it's a very good question. Now, can I just go back? Yeah, sure. I mean, we have a 3-year rule now. In fact, designed as a response to the exit of Hazelwood. Come on.
I don't think that.
That's all right.
I don't think it's very well.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Exactly. I mean, do you really think, just look at June? You know, it's what happens if a plant breaks down? You know, so anyway, so absolutely. And definitely, I'm glad they gave up on the idea of making 5 years, because that's going to make it even more ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, exactly. So we need therefore, you need something like this where you can ensure. So again, I'm talking about managing the exit of coal. The emphasis on managing, right? Because I want them to be operating when I need them. Right? Does that make sense?
You're assuming that this company, basically the same, but there are many companies around the world where people are moving from coal to renewables within the same company, so you have multiple priorities now, and that also introduces more strategic interests within the company. Mm-hmm. How do you see that playing into these?
The complication arises because companies that you're thinking of that are at different bits of the chain. So if you are a retailer, for example, right, then yes, then you think of this as a portfolio, and there's within firms elements of it, but nevertheless, the asset is an asset, right? So regardless, I mean, you're going to maximize as the owner, you're going to maximize that asset, and therefore, I'm just trying to be careful how I answer the question. And therefore, you know, you might not be able to give the 3-year notice because you're going to break down before that, right? That's just inevitable, right? And so the management of that would ensure that, again, that they're going to be available when we need them. So it's not really, I mean, yeah, if companies have their own strategy. They want to become net zero. That's fine, right? But we need this power plants. So regardless of what the incentives are within the firm, we need them to be, some of them to be operating at certain times, you know, and over a certain period of time. So.
I'm just trying to dig into what's behind some of these questions in general about and this is maybe it's a political economy question, is why is it so hard to get governments to, I'm assuming it's hard, why is it so hard to get governments to really, seriously consider this? It seems we've had several other proposals in the past, right? I think Frank Yotza had one, and then the Blueprint Institute had one. So what's that, and what are we missing here? Why is there no symmetry between planning for demand growth, which was a much more firm thing, and now we're saying, oh, we'll leave it to the market with no information?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, Frank's, so there, again, I've gone past what they proposed, because their idea was to have a mechanism whereby you would get the firms to decide when they exit. So they'll be bidding for amount of money so that they would exit by certain dates. I'm beyond that now. AIMO and climate change will decide when they're going to exit, and then they're going to pay them essentially not to exit before that. So the philosophy has changed, right? It's a different. Now on the political economy, it's an interesting question. And having looked at the 2025, I'll be interested to the post 2025. I think it's very difficult to, and again, reflect on my experience overseas, right? Every time depending on where I go, I'm often in a forum with generators, and then within generators you have the some established generators, and then have renewables. Then within renewables have solar and wind. They all have different interests, right? The consumer is often not really there, right? I think that's, to answer your question about the political economy, I think that's part of the problem. And I think, it's a difficult area. So I think governments find it hard. In Australia, I think one issue is that the federal government actually doesn't have a lot of tools, right? And I think that's kind of a problem. Not a problem, but that's, I think, one of the reasons why, and does really rely on that ability of states to coordinate. And states have, played different games, I guess. I think I'm a bit more optimistic now. Do you know why? It sounds crazy, but because prices are going up, and they'll have to do something. Okay. So that's why I'm a bit more optimistic.
So I think, there is a lot of politics in it, obviously, states and territories and various institutions. But I think for some, arguably we already do have a capacity market in the NEM. It's just not an organized capacity market, it's the contract market. And so there already is a mechanism by which coal plants can be paid to be around in 10 years' time or 15 years' time if they enter into contracts with retailers or other major buyers. So for me, the question is, where's the is there a problem with the contract market? It's obviously in terms of the ASX contract market, it's only 3 years. So there's a potential problem. But where's the failure with the contract market, which then needs this kind of market intervention or these kind of regulatory interventions by governments, as opposed to just relying on the market, not the spot market. Well, obviously the contract market's a function of the spot market, but relying on the contract market to deliver these outcomes.
It's again another very good question, and the issue I think is a coordination issue now. Okay, really. So I think we're past that. Yes, the retail reliability obligation, for example, it could have. I wasn't a fan for a number of reasons. Because I wasn't a fan mainly because someone would have to do what I'm now proposing to do. A regulator would have to do that. That's why I wasn't a fan. But now, so because you have to decide what kind of contracts you require the retailers to have, right? And that would involve the kind of decisions I'm talking about now. So I think it's a coordination issue. I think it's really now down to, okay, I need certainty that power plant is going to be operational certain times of the year, or even that, right? So we go on cold storage, and I don't think the contract market would be able to deliver that. Just not enough action there. Does that make sense?
Any more questions from online? All right, so then let's thank you again for an excellent presentation. Thank you all for attending.